Imagine waking up and there is nothing, no roof above your head, no food waiting for you, no door to lock, no number to call when something goes wrong. Just you, the cold ground beneath your body, the dark African sky above you, and somewhere out there in the blackness, something is moving, something is breathing, something is hungry, and it knows exactly where you are. This is not a story. This is not a movie. This was the real morning that every single human being on this earth woke up to 2.4 million years ago. And somehow, they made it through. Every single day. I want to take you somewhere today, not to a country or a city, not to a museum or a history class. I want to take you to a time so far back that the world you know, the buildings, the roads, the phones, the food in your kitchen, none of it exists yet. I want to take you to Africa 2.4 million years ago to meet the people who started everything, the people from whom every single human being on this planet today is descended. I want you to understand how they lived, how they ate, how they slept, how they loved, how they survived in one of the most dangerous environments this world has ever seen. And I especially want to tell you about the women, because their story is one of the most powerful, most overlooked, most extraordinary stories in all of human history. How did a woman survive 2.4 million years ago? How did she protect her children? How did she find food, stay safe, and keep her community alive every single day, with no help from the modern world? That is what we're going to explore today. Before we go any further, if you are new here, welcome. This channel is for people who want to understand where we truly come from. If that speaks to you, subscribe right now and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story like this one. Now, let us begin. Close your eyes for a moment and try to picture a world with no cities, no roads, no electricity, no fences, just land. Endless, open, wild, breathtaking land stretching from horizon to horizon in every direction. That is the Africa of 2.4 million years ago. And it was nothing like the gentle, romanticized version of nature we see in travel photographs. It was raw. It was brutal. It was alive in every possible sense of the word. The landscape was mostly open savanna, vast stretches of tall golden grass, scattered trees, rocky ridges, and wide rivers that flooded in the wet season and shrank to thin threads in the dry months. The sky above was enormous. The silence of it would stun a modern person. No engines, no machines, just wind, birds, insects, and the distant sounds of animals moving across the land. But that land was changing. The climate of this period was shifting slowly and powerfully. Forests that had once been thick and lush were pulling back. Drier, more open land was taking over, and every creature living on that land had to change with it, adapt or disappear. There was no third option. The early humans living in this world were a species scientists call Homo habilis, which translates roughly to the handy human, the human who could use their hands with purpose. They were not exactly like us, shorter in height, maybe 4 to 5 feet tall. Their brains were smaller than ours, though already larger than any other creature walking that land. Their faces still carried features we would recognize as older, more ancient. Strong brow bones, wide jaws, deep-set eyes. But there was something behind those eyes that no other animal had. There was thought. There was planning. There was the very early flickering light of human intelligence. And that light, however small it was enough to change the course of life on Earth. Every single morning began the same way. Not with comfort, not with choice, with urgency. The moment the darkness began to lift and the first pale light spread across the savannah, the day had already started. And the day had one purpose above all others: survive until tomorrow. These early people lived in small groups. A typical group might have anywhere from 10 to 30 individuals: men, women, older people, children, all of them together, all of them dependent on each other in ways that went far deeper than anything most of us will ever experience in our modern lives. Because in this world, being alone was not just difficult. Being alone was a death sentence. The first thing every morning was water, and finding water was never simple. The rivers and watering holes were not just where people drank. They were where every other creature in the area also came to drink, which meant they were also the most dangerous places on the land. Lions waited in the tall grass near the water's edge. Crocodiles lay perfectly still just below the surface, almost invisible. To walk toward the water was always a moment of real risk. So they moved carefully. Someone always watched while others drank, eyes scanning the grass, ears listening for that particular shift in sound that meant danger was close. Even the youngest children who could walk understood this without being taught in words. They watched the adults. They learned by breathing the same air. After water came the long daily search for food. And this is where it gets interesting, because these early people were not the powerful, organized hunters that their descendants would become hundreds of thousands of years later. They were much more flexible than that. They ate what they could find: berries, roots pulled from the hard earth, leaves, insects, eggs from bird nests when they were lucky enough to find them, small lizards or rodents caught by quick hands. And when the opportunity arose, and it required real nerve, the meat left behind by larger predators after a kill. This is called scavenging, and it was an absolutely critical survival strategy. After a lion had eaten its fill and moved on, these early humans would move in, quickly, dangerously quickly, and they used rough stone tools, the first real human tools ever made, to crack open the heavy bones of the carcass and extract the marrow inside. That bone marrow was extraordinarily nutritious, dense with fat and protein, fuel for growing brains, and the fact that they were using tools to get to it tells us something enormous about who they already were. They were problem solvers. Shelter was whatever the land offered: a rocky overhang deep enough to keep the rain off, a cluster of trees with thick enough branches to sleep in, off the ground, away from the creatures that hunted in the dark. There were no built structures, no walls, no roofs. The idea of constructing a home was still far in the future, but they made the most of what was there, and they chose their sleeping spots with real intelligence, elevated when possible, with clear sight lines, protected on at least one side. Fire was perhaps the greatest gift the natural world occasionally offered them. At this early point in history, 2.4 million years ago, these people had not yet fully mastered the ability to create fire themselves. But when lightning struck and natural fire appeared, they recognized its power immediately. A fire kept the darkness at bay. A fire meant warmth through the cold night. And most importantly, a fire kept the predators away. Animals that hunted by night were deeply cautious of fire. A burning flame in the darkness was the closest thing to a wall these people had. When they had it, they protected it fiercely. I want you to really understand what they were up against. Because when I say this world was dangerous, I'm not speaking in comfortable abstract terms. I mean that every single day carried genuine, immediate, life-ending threats. And these threats were everywhere. The predators of this era were not the same animals we see in nature documentaries today. The big cats of 2.4 million years ago were larger, more powerful, and in some cases specifically adapted to hunt early humans. A creature called Dinophilis, a saber-toothed cat, was almost perfectly sized to target our ancestors. Scientists have found the bones of early Homo habilis, with the tooth marks of these cats pressed into them. These were not accidents. These cats hunted our people deliberately, strategically, as a regular food source. The hyenas of this time were far bigger than modern hyenas. They hunted in coordinated packs. They were highly intelligent, and they were persistent. A group of large ancient hyenas was not something that could simply be scared away with a loud noise. They were a genuine, coordinated threat. Beyond predators, starvation was a slow, quiet killer that took lives every dry season without exception. When the rains did not come, the plants dried up and the animals moved. The group would have to travel further and further each day just to find enough food to keep everyone alive. Children suffered first. Their bodies had less reserve. Their need was constant. During the hardest dry seasons, not every child made it. Injury was silent and patient. A deep cut in this world was not a minor inconvenience. It was a potential death sentence. Without any way to clean a wound properly, infection could take a healthy adult within days. A broken bone meant that person could no longer keep up with the group, and a person who could not keep up with the group faced a devastating reality. The group had to survive as a whole. There were moments where impossible choices had to be made. And then there were other groups of early humans. Resources were finite. Water sources were limited. When two groups needed the same territory, the same river, the same hunting ground, conflict happened. These were not organized battles with weapons and strategy. They were fierce, close, personal clashes driven by pure desperation. The need to protect your group, your children, your food source. That need could make anyone dangerous. Now I need to talk about the women, because everything I just described, every threat, every daily challenge, every impossible obstacle, the women of this era faced all of it. And they faced most of it while also carrying, nursing, feeding, and protecting their children at the same time. Let me be completely clear about something. The women of 2.4 million years ago were not passive. They were not sitting somewhere safe, waiting for the men to return with food. That image is completely wrong, and it does a deep injustice to who they actually were. These women were the most essential, most skilled, most consistently productive members of the entire community. Without them, the group would not have eaten. Without them, the children would not have survived. Without them, the knowledge that kept everyone alive would not have been passed down. The women were the gatherers, and gathering was not a simple walk in the park. It was skilled, physically demanding, dangerous daily work. Every morning the women moved out across the land, often together, watching out for each other, covering miles of rocky, thorny, unpredictable terrain. They knew the land in a way that was almost impossible to fully articulate. They knew which roots grew beneath which type of soil. They knew which berries were ripe and which were still bitter. They knew which plants could ease a fever and which ones would kill you. They knew where the hidden water sources were, the ones not obvious from the surface, because their mothers had shown them, and their mothers had shown them, stretching back in an unbroken chain of knowledge that had been built over thousands of generations. This gathered food was the backbone of the group's survival. It was reliable. It was consistent. While hunting was unpredictable, sometimes successful, often not, gathering provided something every single day. And that consistency was what kept children fed, kept nursing mothers strong, kept the elderly alive through the hard seasons. But while the women gathered, they also had to protect themselves. And moving through open savanna in a smaller group, with children among them, required extraordinary awareness and strategy. They never moved carelessly. They moved as a unit, always aware of each other's position. They communicated constantly through sounds and gestures, quick clicks, soft calls, a raised hand that meant stop, a tilted head that meant listen. They had developed a language of survival, built not from words, but from shared experience and deep trust. They watched the birds. This sounds small, but it was crucial. Birds react to predators before humans can see them. A sudden burst of birds from the grass meant something was moving through it. The women read those signs instantly, without discussion, without hesitation. They had learned to understand the land's own warning system. When real danger came close, they used noise and group force. They did not scatter and run individually. That was exactly what a predator wanted. They pulled the children into the center of the group, and they made themselves as loud, as big, as chaotic as possible. They screamed, they threw rocks, they banged stones together. They moved together, not apart. And this coordinated response was genuinely effective. Many predators prefer an easy, quiet target. A circle of screaming, rock-throwing humans was often enough to make even a large predator reconsider. And then there was childbirth. I want you to sit with the reality of this for a moment. Giving birth 2.4 million years ago meant giving birth on the ground, in the open, with no medicine, no sterilization, no trained doctor, no hospital, no safety net of any kind. It was one of the most dangerous things a woman of that era could go through. Women died in childbirth. Babies were lost. This was the reality. And yet the women faced it, supported by the older women of the group, the ones who had lived through it themselves, who carried the knowledge of what to do and what to watch for. A laboring woman was never left alone. The experienced women surrounded her. They knew how to help. They knew the positions. They knew the signs of trouble. They stayed close. They worked together. They protected that mother and that new life with everything they had. And more often than not, both the mother and the child survived. Because of those women, because of that circle of shared knowledge and fierce care. The bond between women in this group was not a luxury. It was not simply friendship. It was survival infrastructure, the trust between them, the knowledge they shared with each other, the way they looked out for each other's children as if they were their own. These things were as essential to the group's survival as any stone tool or any hunting skill. The women were the living, breathing heart of the community. What kept these people alive above all else was not strength. It was not size. It was not even the beginning of tools, as revolutionary as those were. What kept them alive was the fact that they chose each other. Every single day, in every situation, the group stayed together. And together, they were something that no predator, no drought, no disaster could completely destroy. Teamwork was woven into everything they did. When hunting, even the relatively modest hunts of this early period, A coordinated group could succeed where a single person would fail completely. When gathering, multiple people covering different areas in sight of each other could bring back far more than one person working alone all day. When sleeping, they never all closed their eyes at the same time. Some members always kept watch through the dark hours, listening, feeling the air, keeping the fire alive. They shared their food, not just between parents and children, but across the whole group. Today, you find more than you need. You share it. Tomorrow, when someone else finds more, they share it back. This was not charity. This was survival mathematics. Sharing created a web of mutual support that meant even on your worst days, even when you found nothing, you would still eat, because someone else had found something, and they remembered that tomorrow might be their worst day. The older members of the group were deeply valued, not set aside, not considered a burden, valued specifically for what they knew. An elder who had survived 3 droughts had knowledge no young person had yet earned. They remembered where the deep water was hidden under the dry rock. They remembered which season the dangerous cats moved through a certain valley. They remembered what worked and what had killed someone before. That memory was more valuable than any physical strength. That knowledge saved lives. Something was happening inside these early humans that would eventually change everything about life on Earth, though they had no way of knowing it. Their brains were growing, slowly, across generations, getting slightly larger, slightly more complex, slightly more capable of abstract thought. And that growing intelligence was already showing itself in the tools they made. The earliest stone tools, which scientists call Oldowan tools, after the Olduvai Gorge site in Tanzania, where ancient examples were discovered, were simple. A rock struck carefully against another rock to produce a sharp cutting edge. That is it. But the simplicity is deceptive, because to make even that basic tool, you have to look at a rock and imagine what it could become. You have to plan, you have to understand cause and effect. That is not instinct, that is thought. And 2.4 million years ago, thought like that was something extraordinary and new in the world. Their bodies were also becoming something new. Walking upright on 2 feet was one of the defining physical changes of this era. It freed the hands entirely, and free hands meant everything. Carrying food back to the group, carrying children over long distances, carrying tools, using those tools with precision and force. The body and the mind were evolving together, pushing each other forward. Here is what moves me most about this story. These people felt things. I know we cannot go back and look into their hearts, but the evidence tells us clearly they formed bonds, deep ones. A mother who did not love her child fiercely would not carry that child for miles through dangerous heat while watching the horizon for predators. She would not face down a predator to protect that child. But she did. Over and over again, group members cared for each other through illness and injury. When someone in the group was hurt, the others did not simply leave them. They stayed. They slowed down. They brought food and water. That is not just strategy. That is compassion. That is the very earliest form of the human care and kindness we still recognize in each other today. They grieved. When someone in the group died, the others did not simply move on without reaction. There was something in the way they responded to loss that hints at grief, at recognition that something irreplaceable was gone. That something matters, that the person who was here yesterday and is gone today was not nothing. And they communicated. not with full language yet, but with sounds and gestures and expressions that carried real meaning. The ability to point at danger and have others understand immediately. The ability to call the group together. The ability to comfort a frightened child with a sound rather than just a touch. These were the seeds of language, the seeds of everything that came after. 2.4 million years ago, in the heart of Africa, a small group of people woke up every morning with nothing but each other, their knowledge, their courage, and their absolute refusal to stop. No walls, no medicine, no guarantees of anything. They faced animals built to kill them. They faced seasons that gave them nothing. They gave birth on the open earth. They buried their dead under open skies. They carried their children through impossible heat. They kept watch through long, cold, dangerous nights. And every single morning, they got up and did it all again. The women who gathered the food, who protected the children, who shared their knowledge and held the community together through the worst moments. They were extraordinary. Not in the dramatic, celebrated way that history usually reserves for its heroes, but in the quiet, consistent, daily way that actually keeps life going. That is a different kind of strength. And it is the most real kind. The thread that runs from those women on that ancient African ground all the way to every person watching this today. That thread has never broken. Not once. Through every drought and every predator and every impossible season, that thread held. It is still holding right now. You carry all of that inside you, every bit of that strength, that intelligence, that fierce love, that refusal to give up. It is yours. It has always been yours. It was passed to you across 2.4 million years without a single break. If this story reached you today, if it made you feel something real, please give it a like right now. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded of how deep human strength truly runs. And if you have not subscribed yet, do it now. Turn on the bell. Because there are more stories like this one coming. Stories about where we came from, who we truly are, and how we became the most remarkable species this planet has ever seen. This was just the beginning. I will see you in the next one.